Congratulations on making it to the end of section 3 of the Complete iOS Developer course. You're now hopefully familiar with variables, arrays and dictionaries, if statements, for loops, while loops, classes, objects, and these mysterious optionals. Now we're going to put it all together to make a slightly mathsy focused app called Is It Prime? So this app is going to tell you when you put in a number whether or not that number is prime. Now, if you're not sure what a prime number is, it's pretty simple. As it says here, a prime number is a whole number greater than 1 that has only 2 factors, 1 and itself. So the first prime number is 2, 3 is a prime as well, 4 is not because 2 goes into it, 5 is prime, 6 is not because 2 and 3 go into it, 7 is prime, 8, 9 and 10 aren't, etc, etc. So we need to look at the factors or dividers of a number, and if it has any numbers that divide it that aren't 1 or itself, then it's not prime. So your first challenge then, and this will be a challenge, is to write some code where we have, let's say, a number which maybe is 643, and then your code will work out whether or not that number is prime. So you'll likely need to use loops, you'll need to use if statements, and a fair bit more of what you've learned about in this section. But that's all you need to do. So we should have a true or false statement at the very end to tell us whether or not this number is prime. There is one new little trick that you'll need to figure out to write this code, and I have left this out on purpose, so you'll need to do a little Google to figure out how to work out if one number divides exactly into another. So that's one thing we haven't done in Swift before, but you should be able to find the answer very easily on the web. So I'm going to leave that for you to figure out. As always, we're at an early stage in the course, so if you don't feel confident to write the whole thing yourself, feel free to just give it a try and then follow along with the video, but do have a go. You might surprise yourself with how much you can do. Best of luck. All right, here we go then. There's a number of ways, as is often the case, that you can solve this. But what I'm going to do is use what I mentioned at the beginning, which is if a number has any factor which isn't 1 or itself, then it's not prime. So I'm going to start by assuming that the variable is prime. So I'll set is prime is equal to true. And then I'm going to set our counter variable. I'll call it I equal to 2. So that will be the first number that we're going to attempt to divide into our number. And then we'll use a while loop, which will keep going as long as I is less than our number. We don't want I to actually reach our number because we know that 643 divides into 643, but that doesn't count. It would still be prime if that was the case. So we want to keep I just less than our number. And let's not forget to add 1 to I each time we go through the loop. Otherwise it will just go on forever and ever with I being 2. And now comes that bit I mentioned at the beginning, where we have to tell whether I divides into our number or not. And the way we do that is we look for number, and then we use the % symbol and I to work out the remainder when I divides into number. So if that remainder is 0, that means I divides into the number exactly, which means that it can't be prime. So if that's the case, we'll set is prime to be false. And just to show you what I would have searched for, if you didn't manage to figure that out on the internet, I would go for something like Swift, how to tell if one number divides another. Something like that. So just ask what it is you're trying to do and put Swift at the beginning. Here we go. Now that first result actually looks very promising, but it doesn't have the word Swift in it. So I'm going to actually use this one. Check if an integer is divisible by another integer. This takes us to the wonderful Stack Overflow, which you'll see many times in your coding journey. And there we go, you see. This is exactly the answer we were looking for. So if number 2 % number 1 is 0, that means the remainder when number 1 divides into number 2 is 0, which means it goes exactly. So that's actually all the code that we need. So let's then print is prime, and we should get the answer first off whether 643 is actually prime, and the answer is true. So 643 is a prime number. So let's check through a few numbers that we know and make sure it gets the right answer to those. Aha! So we have our first problem already. 1 is not a prime number. It's a bit of a special case. So I'm actually going to cheat slightly and just put that in as a manual test. So if number equals 1, then we'll set is prime equals false. You may be able to find a more elegant way of dealing with that, but 1 is our only exception. So I think it's reasonable to put that in there to keep our code nice and clean. So let's try number equals 2, and this should return true, and that's true. So looking good. 3 should be true as well, and it is. Excellent. 4 should be false because 2 goes into it, and it is. Yep. So this is looking promising. 5 is true, as it should be. 6 is false. Excellent. Let's just try a larger one. 17 is true. Excellent. So we now have our core code to work out whether a number is prime or not. And I hope you've also seen the advantage of, in some cases, setting up the core of your app in a playground or a separate coding environment, because that means that you can afford to make errors a lot quicker and figure out how that bit works without having to compile and run the app every time to see if your code is right. So for some apps, this can be a really useful diversion to get this bit done first and then import it over into a main Xcode project. But that's, of course, what we need to do now, and we'll be doing that part of the app in the next video.